Hi everyone, welcome to Two Off the First. It is January the 8th, 2026. I'm Brian Ballengee. Great to have you here with us for the kickoff show of the 2026 year. We've got a lot to get to. Obviously, the format of the show is try to do 2 stories a day. We're going to try and change things a little bit this year in doing 2 stories per episode, but fewer episodes per week. We tried to do this, intending to do it 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And the reality is that my schedule and doing everything else that I do makes it almost impossible to do 5 shows a week and do them well. So we're going to kind of slide back into this by doing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday shows. 2-3 shows a week. That'll get us to start a tournament, get us through the halfway part of tournament week, and then also have kind of Tuesday to reconvene after Sunday and whatever happens on Monday. I think that schedule will work out a little bit better. Still do video versions of the shows. Those will come along basically starting next week once we get going with the PGA Tour season and the Sony Open Hawaii. But I wanted to kind of kick things off with an audio-only version of the show today and talk about 2 stories that have come in the last couple days that are certainly interesting to me and hopefully to you as well. First, let's start with women's TGL. So TGL, their parent company, which is TMRW Tomorrow Sports, they have announced with the LPGA the formation of women's TGL, or what they're calling WTGL. And that's going to start sometime at the end of the 2026 LPGA season, which, if you follow the LPGA, ends basically in the middle of November, early November. And then at that point, they'll figure out when they're going to run it, the Women's TGL League. Sounds like it's going to run potentially overlapping with TGL, maybe before. I think they're going to figure that out. I think one of the important factors in determining that is what happens to the PGA Tour schedule in 2027. Obviously, we don't have the Century this week, and that stinks. But if this is indicative of bigger changes to the PGA Tour schedule, including the start date being pushed into February, as has been rumored to be on the discussion, or on the chopping block, so to speak, then that would create kind of this window for the TGL season to happen in January and part of February and be done with it, basically. So in that case, would you have WTGL happen in November and December and cross over into January and close that way? How would that work exactly? The LPGA is also has schedule questions of their own because they have to figure out how they want to manage starting their season as well, because they have the Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament of Champions, which is like their one domestic event before they go off and do the Winter Asian Swing. So they start the year here. It's meant for winners of the last 2 seasons, but you really can't get everyone, especially the players who are based in Asia, because they're spending time at home. So do they want to push back the start of their season a little bit as well? I don't know. Craig Kessler's still trying to figure that out in his role as LPGA commissioner. So some unknowns there. But I think this is obviously a good thing. I'm a fan of TGL. I don't know if you are. You may or may not be. But even if you're not a fan of TGL, I think having women's TGL is a great opportunity for the LPGA because it gives them a chance to showcase their players in a different format and also showcase their players outside of the context of 72-hole rope, inside the ropes golf, where you don't really get to show your personality quite as much. You got a lot of cameras on you in TGL and the SoFi Center. You got live mics. You can be you and still compete. And I think that's a really good thing for the LPGA. I think for too long, the LPGA has been branded a bunch of robots, even though that's true of all professional golfers. It's not just relegated to women on the LPGA Tour. Most professional golfers tend to be robots inside the ropes. And that's why TGL can work, because players with personalities can shine and they can still be talented and capture your attention in a different way. It sounds like from the news conference and the announcement of WTGL that they're looking at a similar kind of structure. 6-ish teams, maybe 7. There's going to be a 7th TGL team next year. Detroit will be a team. And so you're going to probably have a similar structure of match, 5 matches in a round robin, and then you'll have playoffs, and they'll get it over relatively short period of time. And I think that can work out really, really well. It doesn't sound like there's any rush to do crossover teams or, men and women together competing. And I think that's something they could do fairly easily. But the stated rationale from the LPGA and Tomorrow Sports, really more Tomorrow Sports, was we wanted to get this thing off the ground on the women's side, and then we can entertain having a mixed competition. And I know the folks who are LPGA advocates and fans of TGL have asked, well, why don't you just do mixed everything, right? Just skip having the WTGL and just have men and women competing together. The rub from having PGA Tour players who might be better known than some of the LPGA players, that could work out to their favor. There seem to be benefits in doing that. I think two things. One, Tomorrow Sports is a business, right? They can't sell more franchises to investors if they just make it all mixed, right? Now you can have 12 franchises or 14 or 13 franchises, depending on how you do it, right? You could have 7 for the men, 6 or 7 for the women. Sorry. But you can do that, and you can sell that to investors and make a boatload of money. And this is a business after all, and it's clear that it's a business. Everything is sponsored, and it's all money coming in the door, right? It's pretty easy money, to be honest, coming in the door for what they have built in one season. So it makes sense from a financial perspective that they're going to pursue having 6 or 7 different new franchises just for the women's TGL league. Then, depending on what kind of crossover there is, for example, Alexis Ohanian, who's one of the Reddit co-founders who owns the Los Angeles Golf Club in TGL, he has right of first refusal for an LA-based team in women's TGL. So can he own both of those teams? And how much will there be an ownership crossover like that? I mean, will all the other teams, all the other ownership groups just say, you know what, we'll take the women's franchise too, and we'll make it Boston Common Golf, and it'll be a men's and women's roster, and you'll have the same thing for Los Angeles Golf Club. I'm interested to know that. Or will other folks come in? We'll just have to see about all of that, I guess. And ultimately, who plays is interesting to me. Because if you think about the number of players that people know in kind of general golf circles that are LPGA players, Nelly Korda comes to mind right away, of course. You've probably got Lydia Ko in there. You've certainly got Charlie Hall in there to a degree. But if you look at the rest of the top 10 in the world, and this is no slam against Gino Titicul, who's amazing, but people don't know her as well quite yet. So would she want to play? Would she want to be a part of this? Minjee Lee has a great personality. 3-time major winner? And she would fit in this really, really well, I think. I mean, she is Minwoo's sister after all. I think they would do very, very well in this. Would Lydia Ko play, right? Would she want to play? But then you got players like Miyu Yamashita, who's a major winner this year from the Open. You've got Ronnie Yin, you've got Hyu Kim, Mao Saigo, Se-Young Kim, all players that can probably showcase their personality without having to talk a whole lot. But does the language barrier matter here? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if that's going to go into the consideration from Tomorrow Sports and the LPGA. If you go beyond that, you're thinking someone like Lottie Woad. Angel Yin's very entertaining to watch. Hannah Green, I think, would be great in this. She can really show off. Lauren Coughlin would be really fun. I think Grace Kim's got a great personality for this. Brooke Henderson would be a name player you'd want to have. I think Lynn Grant, you'd want to have part of it. But again, how do you figure all that out? How'd they figure it out for TGL, right? I mean, this was being formed at a time when the live golf stuff was really happening and who was being poached, and they had their delay of 1 year and all that stuff. So that changed things. But these guys made a multi-year commitment to play in TGL for the first couple of years. You would assume the same thing would happen with the women. You'd make a multi-year commitment to play in WTGL for at least 2 seasons before any kind of turnover starts to happen there. So I think they can get to having these crossover nights or maybe kind of special nights like that. I think that would be really cool. TGL also has to kind of solidify on the men's side. I guess we're calling it men's TGL. Its own broadcast partner after this year. They have a 2-year agreement with ESPN, ABC, Disney, that conglomerate. That's going to end. It can be extended, of course, or do they go to another platform? Do you go take this to Netflix, Apple, Amazon? Do you take it to traditional TV and try to get NBC involved or Versant involved? I don't know. I guess we'll see about that. And is the partner for WTGL the same? How does that work? Because the unfortunate reality is there's probably going to be a different broadcast standard. Not the quality of the broadcast, but who the partner is for WTGL versus TGL. I hope that there's not. I hope that Tomorrow Sports comes and says, this is a whole package deal, and with the success of the WNBA and the success of NWSL and women's tennis and all this stuff, we want equal opportunity. We can get it. Here we are. I hope it comes to that. I hope it works out that way, but I don't know how that's going to work out. So a lot more unknowns than knowns, other than we know that it exists, and that's a great thing. I'm happy to hear that. Longtime LPGA fan, cover the LPGA forever. Did the first ever LPGA only podcast. Glad that there's another out there, mixed bag from Fried Egg. Glad it exists. They do a great job. But this is a good development, and hopefully it's a longer term good thing. And hopefully, as someone who likes TGL, this kind of portends a longer term vision for the future for this concept. Obviously, the people involved put in a lot of money, raised a lot of money, got a lot of money in the door. This thing isn't going away anytime soon. At least it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon with this announcement. All right, second story let's talk about is Vijay Singh. Vijay Singh is 62 years old, and he's going to be on the PGA Tour as a fully fledged member in 2026. The PGA Tour revealed the kind of status of certain players, and Vijay Singh was the only player to cash in on one of three available basically career achievement exemptions that are available to players on the PGA Tour. There are two. They're based on the money list. If you were in the top 25 of the all-time PGA Tour money list or the top 50 of the all-time PGA Tour money list, you can get a one-year exemption for both of those. Not at the same time, but you could do them sequentially. You could do 50 then 25, 25 then 50, whatever. But those are one-year exemptions available if you're on that list. And then there is a worse off exemption, but still available and relatively new compared to that one, or those two, for making 300 cuts on in PGA Tour events. Not PGA Tour umbrella, so that doesn't include like Korn Ferry Tour or PGA Tour America. But it's 300 PGA Tour cuts made. You can also get in there with a one-year exemption that's available to you. You can use each of these exemptions one time, and they're good for 1 year. And you can use them sequentially. You can use them whenever you want. As long as you're qualified, you can use them whenever you feel like. And Vijay Singh's calling in his favor. He turned 63 in February. I think it's February 22nd is his birthday. He's going to play the PGA Tour as a full-fledged member. He has access to tournaments ahead of the category of people who finish 101 to 110 in the FedEx Cup fall standings. That's crazy to me. And the natural reaction to this, I think from a lot of people, is WTF? How is this possible? Why is he doing this? This is bad. And I think there's some blaming of Vijay Singh for doing it. And I get that, right? I mean, he's 62 years old. He hasn't played a non-Masters PGA Tour event since the 2021 Honda Classic. He hasn't made a non-Masters cut. He made the 2024 Masters cut, T58. But he hasn't made a non-Masters PGA Tour cut since Memorial 2020, which is also kind of bonkers. And the objective expectations have to be very low. However, Vijay Singh also has access to these exemptions, and by God, he should use them. If we had them, we would use them, right? The money on the PGA Tour is greater than the money on the PGA Tour champions by a factor of 6, and that's before we even talk about the really more like 7 before we get to talking about the FedEx Cup bonus pool. I don't think any objective observer expects Vijay Singh to qualify for the FedEx Cup playoffs. That would be probably one of the greatest athletic achievements in golf history. And I'm not saying that facetiously. For a 63-year-old man to play a whole season and then somehow be one of the 70 best players, that would be amazing. It would also be equally amazing if at the end of the FedEx Cup fall, he were in the top 100. Either of those things would be incredible achievements. I don't think either is going to happen. But the money just for making the cut alone is basically worth a top 5 finish on the PGA Tour Champions. So it's kind of worth it for him to try. He still loves playing. Obviously, he's getting close to the swan song. You can't just keep playing golf forever. He could, hypothetically, he's made 509 PGA Tour cuts. He could be exempt for the next 3 years. He could take the 25, the 50, and the 300 and just go bang, 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 walk away, see you later. That's totally possible. Also, I think people need to recognize the PGA Tour's relationship with Vijay Singh is not very good. I mean, he's won, 34 times, I think it was, on the PGA Tour. But in 2013, he was suspended under the anti-doping program for admitting to Sports Illustrated that he used a substance called deer antler spray, which had a banned substance. I think it's IGP-1. I forget exactly what it's called, but had a banned substance in it. And basically it said, you admitted to taking deer antler spray, which has a banned substance in it. You're suspended. And then that resulted in them rescinding the suspension because they really couldn't prove that he took it, even though the policy said basically admission of guilt is good enough for us. And that resulted in a multi-year, 5-year lawsuit, basically, between Singh and the PGA Tour. Ultimately, it was going to go to trial. PGA Tour and Singh settled, and that happened in 2018. And that relationship, it's not like it's rosy and perfect. So I would imagine there's an element of spite to this as well. I mean, Vijay's won a handful of times the PGA Tour Champions. He never dominated there. Never really figured out that formula. Maybe his heart wasn't in it. I don't know. I don't know why it didn't work for him. But he has this opportunity. He doesn't particularly feel warm and fuzzy about the PGA Tour. And so he's going to go use it. And he might use them all. And there's nothing they can do to stop him unless they change the rules. And that's kind of where the backlash lies. I mean, I personally think that you shouldn't be able to use this exemption after the age of like 52 or 55, something like that. Maybe even 50. Like if you're eligible for the PGA Tour Champions, you shouldn't be able to use this exemption. Maybe that's how it works. But there should be some kind of age restriction on this. Because hypothetically speaking, any player could be any age, and so long as they're in the top 25 or 50, they could still use that exemption at some point in the future. Now, obviously, the money has changed. Vijay Singh is still 6th on the all-time PGA Tour money list, $72.1-ish million, about $50 million behind Tiger Woods, who earned a little over $120 million so far in his PGA Tour career. Scottie Scheffler is number 3 already, and Rory McIlroy is number 2. Rory's the only other player over $100 million, $101-ish million. Scottie Scheffler is going to eclipse that easily this year. He's at 99 point something million. Again, that's official money. That doesn't even include the FedEx Cup that he won, not in 2025, but in 2024. So he's way over that $100 million point. However, with the money changing, you might be more likely to see turnover quicker. So maybe but that's not going to last that way forever. You're just going to knock out guys from a different generation. But like even Jim Furyk, he's like 5th on the list. So it's kind of hard it's got to be a long career, and careers are long in golf. So if you've got a 20-year career and you're still going and then you've earned a lot of money and it's harder for you to beat, someone's got to go another 20 years to beat you, or the money's got to change, or both. And you're not going to get knocked out very easily. And that's how it leads to the possibility that Vijay Singh could be exempt for the next 3 years. Meanwhile, Matt Kuchar chose to not use one of his lifetime exemption categories and would just kind of go about it with the status that he had from the FedEx Cup last season. I think that's kind of interesting. I am assuming he's going to wait to a more vulnerable point to use it. Not because he's got some special honor or ethics about it. Just, hey, the strategy might say, let me roll the dice this year. He was playing better at points. He can maybe get his status back and not have to use what is available to him and will remain available to him for a while. So that makes sense. It's interesting, man. I did not see Vijay Singh pulling out the one-time exemption card. I honestly thought he had used the top 50 exemption once. I was trying to research it today, and I didn't see it. But the thing I did come across in researching how Vijay Singh got to the PGA Tour, because I just kind of never looked into it. Vijay Singh got to the PGA Tour because he earned special temporary membership in early 1993, March 1993. And that happened because he finished tied for second at Bay Hill, which was sponsored by Nestle at the time. And Arnold Palmer personally invited Vijay Singh to compete in the tournament. And he's wont to do it. I mean, he did that all the time when he was alive. He would invite guys that he thought were interesting, even if they weren't particularly highly rated. He just wanted to give them a shot. And Vijay got a shot. He took advantage, finished T2, earned special temporary membership, later won that year in a playoff against Mark Wiebe, won PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, and his career was born from there. I think if you're looking at that as Vijay Singh, or maybe as Vijay Singh, you don't think about it that way. You just think, oh, I earned it. I'm good. I'm, whatever. But a lot of players don't get where they get in life, particularly in professional golf, without the good grace and fortune to have good breaks. To have people who want to give you an opportunity, or who like you, or want to give you an exemption, or cut you a check, or raise money for you, or whatever it is. You don't get there without those people. And I know Vijay kind of pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He used his life savings to get over onto the European tour. He made something of it. He was developing into a force in professional golf in 1992. He played 5 times on the PGA Tour that year, including a couple of major championship starts. First major in the United States, the PGA that year, which he would go on to win 2 times in his career. That all said, if he looks kind of back on what he achieved and how he achieved it, he no doubt had help from people who wanted to give him an opportunity. And so I think he would look at this and go, on one hand, hey, I'm going to use it, and you would too. I totally get that. But on the other hand, the rules have tightened here, right? Not top 125 fully exempt anymore. It's top 100. We have 10 fewer graduates from the Korn Ferry Tour than we did for the prior 2 seasons. Everything is different now for the first time in 40 years, really, on the PGA Tour in a big way. And yeah, Vijay Singh's one guy, but he's taken up one spot in a fewer all-exempt roster. Also, in a tour schedule where there are fewer spots, fewer places in almost every field until you get to the middle of the summer. And one hand, I get it. You use what's available to you. On the other hand, it feels selfish. So I don't know really how I come down with it. But if the PGA Tour wants to prevent such a thing from happening again in the future, then they should probably change the rules. Otherwise, look forward to seeing Vijay Singh the next 3 years. A 3-year victory lap on the PGA Tour. That's going to do it for us today on 2 at the First. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Again, we'll run the schedule here. We'll do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday shows, 3 shows a week. And we'll try to keep you plugged in that way. If you got questions, email me, ryan@thegolfnewsnet.com. I'm on social media, either at Ryan Ballengee or Ryan Ballengee Golf. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time on 2 Off the First.